Hello everyone, Phoenix Knight here. Welcome to the channel, and welcome back to Christmas in Arkham 2023. Hopefully you've had a great Thanksgiving weekend and had a chance to celebrate with your family and go out to take advantage of some great deals on Black Friday if you do that. And now you're ready to get back to work for the rest of the year. My work year is going to be very short, but we will be coming back to that idea during the end of November recap coming up later this week. For now, however, Christmas in Arkham with the Fate of the Elder Gods tournament has one last order of business. Our three Ancient Ones in the winners group are waiting for us, so we need to find ourselves an opponent for this year's Christmas in Arkham. Before we can do that and start meeting the Ancient Ones, though, we need to go over to the altar and kind of set the scene a little bit. If you're happening on this as the first video of the Fate of the Elder Gods tournament, the way this game works is instead of playing the investigators trying to banish the Ancient One, you're actually playing as the Ancient One trying to get summoned. The way you'll do that is you'll be moving around the board in what's called the altar, going up to the various locations, preparing spells, gathering artifacts, ultimately getting your cultists up to the other world to get them summoned. So let's go through each location real quick. You'll also see that we have two what are known as fate pieces on the board. We'll be controlling the darker fate piece. That one starts up at the other worlds. The investigators, who we play against in a solo game, will be playing the lighter fate piece, moving through using that one to move around. So at the other worlds, like I said, that's where you sacrifice your cultists and gain progress on your summoning track, because your goal is to get summoned. The museum, you can gather an artifact, either one from the display or one from the top of the deck, and we'll come back to what those are after we go through the rest of the locations. Down at the ceremony, each Ancient One has a dark gift that they can trigger, so they'll get to trigger that there, and they get a gate card, which they can use for movement. You would normally discard a spell to move to a specific location. The gate cards can let you move anywhere. They're also the only way you can get up to the other worlds in one card, because you can also use two of the same color as a wild symbol. The Streets of Arkham is an interesting location because it works slightly different in the solo game. In a multiplayer game, you'd normally give out investigators to the other lodges and raid them. Basically, the investigators attack. But in the solo game, if you as the Ancient One moves to the Streets of Arkham, you can get rid of investigators from your lodge. If the investigators move there, then you get raided immediately with however many investigators you have on there, 1 die per investigator. At the gathering, you'll gain cultists and you can move them to different locations. The library lets you draw 3 cards from the spell deck, which is right over here, and you can ready an additional spell with the same astral column of symbols and cards there. Each location also has a slightly stronger action that you can take if you control the location, but we'll talk about that when control actually becomes relevant, whether through temporary control on a die roll or outright control. Outright control is defined in this game as having at least 3 cultists at a location, and more cultists than, in this case, investigators for the solo game, or any other cult in a multiplayer game. With that, though, we need to reveal the artifact display and the monster reserve. So first up in the artifact display we have the Jade Statue. You can discard this artifact. That's what that symbol means. If you're at the other world, you get to reroll 2 of your dice. And our second artifact, Scepter of the Elders. Exhaust this. Sacrifice 1 cultist from any location to flip 1 of your dice to the opposite face. And then the monsters, which are probably largely going to go ignored by these 3 Ancient Ones. The Hunting Horror, with room for 4 tokens at the top. Place the Hunting Horror on this card. On your turn, you may discard 1 token to place the Hunting Horror on any lodge. When cultists or investigators are added to the occupied lodge, roll 1 die for each. On a Tentacle or Cthulhu, destroy the investigator or cultist, then return the Hunting Horror to this card. If the Hunting Horror returns to this card and there are no more tokens, remove the Hunting Horror from play. And the Dark Young with 2 tokens. On your turn, you may discard 1 token to place Dark Young on a location. Move all investigators there to any one location, then roll 3 dice. For each tentacle, destroy 1 cultist. For For each Cthulhu, destroy 2. Investigators cannot be placed or moved into a location occupied by Dark Young. So that's everything set up. As we'll notice as we go through the Ancient Ones, 2 of our Ancient Ones in this year's Winners Group will offer the possibility of a rematch, whereas the third one would be a new opponent in this campaign. But we're all set up, so let's go meet the winner of Group 1. On a snowy day here in southeast Wisconsin, our first Ancient One and the winner of Group 1 is the Windwalker, Ithaqua. He took no Elder Signs but 3 curses on his way to being summoned. He'll be doing everything in purple. His dark gift is Wendigo. See if I can zoom in on that just a touch so you can read along with me. That'll work. Remove all Winter Squall tokens from the altar. Shuffle all Winter Squall tokens, draw 3, and look at them. Place the tokens on 3 different locations, face down. We'll place them face up because we're playing a solo game. Destroy 1 cultist or investigator from each of these locations. When any cult activates a location with a Winter Squall token, reveal the squall and apply the effect. Then discard that token. The Winter Squall tokens are right here, and I'll put these off to the side. Then we have our hand of 3 spells to start with. So on a red, Ithaqua has Call of the Wicked Ones, taking a blue and 2 green. Summon a monster and become cursed. Not that these are particularly useful from the looks of it. On a yellow, Ithaqua has Confound, taking a green and 2 red. Move 1 investigator from 1 location to an adjacent location, or destroy all investigators in your lodge. And on a green, Find Gate, taking a white and a red. At the start of your turn, draw a gate card, regardless of whether you have a gate already. During the move phase of this turn, you must use this gate card for movement. So once again, that's a card we can use to move anywhere on the board. But with that all set up, let's move back over to the altar and see what Ithaqua is doing for his playthrough. Given that Call of the Wicked Ones is basically total garbage, with the monsters not being very good, I'm going to discard that on a red to move over to the library, because more cards is more good. We'll place a cultist and an investigator. You're probably wondering at the weird layout of the cultists and the investigators. The reason for the weird layout is on Black Friday, I went out and bought a new dice tower, but apparently somebody forgot the part about less imposing. So let me see if I can tip this in there. What I like about this dice tower, though, is it's got space that I can put my dice in there. So I don't have to have another cup out for that. I actually have the dice in one place. I may actually try this tower out for at least Eldritch Horror, but we'll see how this works. But we need to roll for temporary control. Don't pay attention to the dice in here. The one in here is the one that matters. And it's very quiet, but more importantly, we do get temporary control of the location. That was a Cthulhu face, so we do get temporary control of the location. We can get that out of the way. Then we'll draw 3 spells, and we can ready 2 with red and blue, plus 1 plus we can sacrifice a cultist to ready 1 at no cost. But let's see what we find. On a blue, Ithaqua finds Enlighten the Investigators, taking white and red. Cast when a cult discards a monster token. That cult places 2 investigators in their lodge. That looks mostly like movement fodder. On a white, Ithaqua will find an Ancient Stirring, taking 3 white. Advance 1 on the summon track. You may sacrifice 1 of your cultists at the current altar location to advance 1 more on the summon track. That seems really good, actually. And on a yellow, Ithaqua will find Call of the Wicked Ones, taking a red and 2 blue. Summon a monster and become cursed. We're not preparing anything naturally with red and blue, but because we have temporary control of the location, I will sacrifice a cultist to ready and immediately cast an Ancient Stirring to advance 1 on the summon track, and I may sacrifice an occultist at the current altar location to advance one more. So that's done, which means Ithaqua's already advanced 2 on his summon track. Then we'll draw another card. On a green, Ithaqua will find the stars are right, taking a red and 2 blue. Assign each cult, including yours, one of the following. Lose an elder sign, gain 2 cultists from the abyss, gain 2 investigators, or become cursed. Unfortunately, at the streets of Arkham, the investigators will be discarding a red, trying to move to the library, except we're there already, so they'll move to the other worlds, placing a cultist there, and Ithaqua will take his first curse. Now, I didn't mention this in the intro, but there are 2 ways we can lose the game. We can lose either by taking 5 curses or 10 elder signs. If you watch the intro for Christmas in Arkham, though, you'll know that the tiebreakers are an ancient one gets summoned, then number of elder signs, then fewest curses. So if an ancient one is not going to get summoned, they would much rather lose via curses than elder signs. Just because I figure the elder signs are thematically more dangerous, but that's just my musing on that. Coming back to Ithaqua's turn, though, we're going to use the stars are right at the library to move down to the gathering, which will place a cultist and an investigator. Once more, I wouldn't mind getting temporary control here, so let's see if we can roll that. Let's see if we can roll that Cthulhu once again. We cannot, which is unfortunate. But what we will get is we'll get 3 cultists back from the abyss into our lodge, and then we can move 1. We'll move 1 up to the other worlds. With green and blue, I don't think there's much there that Ithaqua's preparing. There is not. So he'll draw, and on a green, Ithaqua will draw. Another Ancient Stirring taking 3 green. We used this earlier with the 3 white version. The investigators will discard a red at the other worlds to move over to the library and place another cultist. Now what do we want here? Are there any of these spells that are particularly crappy? Enlighten the investigators is pretty bad. I really like both of our green spells, actually. So I think we're going to discard a... I think we're going to discard 2 white or 2 blue at the library to move over to the ceremony, which will place an investigator and a cultist. Once again, we will roll for temporary control of the location, because I wouldn't mind having temporary control of the ceremony this turn. Which I don't manage to get. That was a tentacle face. Whoa! Did not mean to jar the camera there. Trying to move the dice tower out of the way. But we get a gate card, which we'll probably use for movement next turn. And then we get to trigger Ithaqua's Dark Gift. So we'll shuffle up the Winter Squall tokens. Let me shuffle there. Then we'll cut, and we'll take these 3 as our Winter Squall tokens. So first Squall token up, or first Winter Squall, no effects. Next up, gain 2 Elder Signs, gross, and no effects. So I think what we're going to do with the gain 2 Elder Signs, because we really don't want that. Actually, I'm going to try to put that somewhere where I don't think I need to go. I'm going to put that one on the streets of Arkham, which will destroy an investigator there. I'll put a no effects at the library, which will destroy an investigator there. and this one at the other worlds to destroy an investigator there. Right? Yes. Alright, we didn't get temporary control, so we don't get to trigger the control action on the ceremony. With 2 white, I don't think Ithaqua... Nope, Ithaqua is not preparing anything. So on a green, he'll find... Coerce the Innocent, taking white, yellow, red. Move to 2 investigators from any one location or lodge to any lodges. Then the investigators will... Oh, wait. I moved their fate piece. They were at the other worlds. So I wanted to be here. Right. Okay. I moved down to the ceremony. Okay, I moved the wrong fate piece. So the investigators will discard a green at the other worlds to move to the gathering and place another cultist. Let's see. What do I want to do here? Am I using this gate for movement? I think I have to. The only question is, where do I want to move? Let's see, that's 3 blue. 3 blue, green, or 3 blue, green, red. Wouldn't let me prepare anything there unless I get temporary control. Could I move to the other worlds and start a summon? I could, potentially. But I think I'm going to move to the library instead, which will make that go away. I'll put out a cultist and an investigator. I kind of do want temporary control once again, just because I've got that ancient stirring in hand already. We'll pull that investigator back up. I don't get temporary control, which is rather unfortunate. Careful not to jar the camera this time, Phoenix. Actually, I put the dice tower... I'll put it on this side. I'll put it back over there. Drawing 3 cards and I can ready an additional spell. On a green, Ithaqua will find Sign of the Brotherhood, taking 2 yellow and a white. Choose one of their cults. We won't be worried about that. We'll return 3 of our cultists from the Abyss and place them in the Lodge. On a blue, Ithaqua will find Alter Fate, taking a yellow and a green. Either re-roll up to 3 of your dice once or 1 of your dice up to 3 times. And on a red, Ithaqua will find Cubes of Power, taking blue and green. When you're rolling dice, you may add 2 dice to the roll. So without temporary control, I think I will actually use blue and green there to prepare Cubes of Power, but I'm not going to cast it immediately. In fact, it's actually kind of helpful not to be able to cast it right away, because that'll give me a red for purposes of preparing spells when I'm preparing anywhere on the altar. And then there's nothing else I can prepare, so all of that's gone. Then on a yellow, Ithaqua will draw Broken Seal, taking 3 yellow. Destroy any 1 elder sign. You may sacrifice a cultist at the current altar location to destroy 1 more. The investigators will then discard a yellow at the gathering to move to the streets of Arkham, which would trigger that winter squall, but it goes away. Looking at my hand right now, there really isn't anywhere unless I want to prepare a reroll, and that might not be a terrible idea. The one thing I don't like about that is it's going to put 3 cultists on my lodge, so anytime the investigators start moving to the streets of Arkham, that could be perilous. But we're also not near taking an elder sign penalty. So I think we're going to... I think we're going to try to start nickel and diming a little bit on the summon track. So I'm going to discard 2 yellow to move up to the other worlds, which will take that winter squall off, placing a cultist and an investigator. I do have control of the location outright because I have 3 cultists to 2 investigators, so I will get the control effect on the roll there. I'll get to roll 3 dice since I have 3 cultists there. For every tentacle or Cthulhu I roll on the summon, I get to advance 1 on the summon track. And then for each Cthulhu I roll, I get to return 1 of those cultists back to my lodge. I don't necessarily need the cultists back because I've got plenty right now. But it would be nice to keep them there, so I keep Elder Sign penalties far at bay. That'll let me sacrifice 1 cultist to advance 1 on the summon track. We'll get the rest. We'll get that back out of the way. And then what do we have up there for the astral column? Wild, white, 2 red, and a green. Is there anything we're preparing for that? If I had a 3 red ancient stirring, I'd prepare and cast that in a heartbeat, but I don't. But I think I will actually prepare... a Find Gate. So all of that's gone. I used the white and the green to prepare a Find Gate. Then on a white Ithaqua we'll find... Alhazred's Vengeance, taking yellow, green, red. Reveal when another cult takes an action that places at least 1 cultist on your, or 1 investigator on your lodge. That cult becomes cursed, and that sounds like moving fodder to me. The investigators will discard a green at the streets of Arkham to move to the Gathering and place another investigator. That is a very dangerous location, so I think with that in mind, do I want to cast Find Gate here? I think I do, actually. I think I am going to go ahead... Well... Yeah, I think I am going to cast... Actually, you know what I could do? I could use 2 green here, planning on moving back to the other world soon. I've got a little bit of a plan here, but I'll use the 2 green at the other worlds to move down to the ceremony, which will put a cultist and another investigator there. But I do have to roll for temporary control, so we'll bring the dice tower right back in shot. I don't get temporary control, which is unfortunate. But I will get a gate card, and I will get to trigger Ithaqua's Dark Gift once again. And we'll give that... The problem with these Winter Squall tokens is they're so awkward to shuffle. No matter how you do it, whether you hold them by the ridged side or you hold them like so. This orientation I've been finding a little better to shuffle, but not much. But we'll give that a cut, and we'll get these 3 Winter Squall tokens. First up, we'll find... Add an investigator to your lodge, max of 4, equal to your current level on the summon track. Gross. Next up, gain 2 Elder Signs. That's disgusting. And discard your hand of spell cards, then draw 2 spell cards. That's actually pretty... A lot of these actually kind of suck a bit for the solo game. So I think... I think I'm going to put the gain 2 Elder Signs. Yikes. I need to go to the Gathering soon. I'll put gain 2 Elder Signs at the ceremony, which will discard that investigator. Then we'll add an investigator to your lodge. Yikes, I don't want to put that on the Gathering because that'll just trigger a raid. Next time I have to go there, which I'm quite a ways away from having to, actually. I'll put that on the museum because I haven't been there yet and I've had no interest in going there. Discard your hand of spell cards, then draw 2 spell cards. I'll put that up at the Gathering because I'd be looking to cycle my spells when I'm there anyway. Then looking at the card, that the spells I've got in my hand, I'm going to prepare. I'm actually not going to prepare because I want a slot open for an Ancient Stirring. So on a white Ithaqua, we'll draw another Find Gate, this one taking a green and a yellow. The investigators will then discard a red at the Gathering to move up to the museum, which will make that Squall token go away. And we'll place an investigator out there. Now I'll cast Find Gate, which I'm going to have to use for movement. So which will give me a gate card, which I have to use for movement. I think we are going to go back up to the other worlds, placing a cultist and an investigator. I'll have to roll for temporary control. So we'll bring the dice tower, put it there, trying to move some of this stuff around so I can actually fit the dice tower in here. We'll put that there. I don't get temporary control, which is not terrible. Oh, I actually need the dice tower there still. And I get 3 dice. That'll be to sacrifice 1 cultist from the location to advance 1 on the summon track. Then here's where the plan kind of comes into play a little bit. The reason I played 2 greens and didn't use a gate there, I'm going to use the 2 greens and the wild symbol there to prepare and immediately cast an Ancient Stirring, so those are gone, which means I can advance 1 on the summon track and then sacrifice a cultist there to advance another one. So Ithaqua is up to 6 on the summon track. Then on a white Ithaqua we'll find Coerce the Innocent, taking green, blue, yellow. Actually, we draw... Nope. The rest of my hand is right here. Never mind. Okay. The investigators will then discard a red at the library to try to move to the other... Well, they'd have to move somewhere. They move to the other worlds, but they can't because I'm there. So they'll move to the streets of Arkham, which will put an investigator out on the location, give Ithaqua his second curse, and then he would get raided, but there are still no investigators on his lodge, thankfully. Looking at Ithaqua's hand, though, I think we are going to discard a... Yikes. I definitely don't want to move to the library. I think I'm going to bite the bullet at the other worlds. I'm going to have to risk putting some investigators on the lodge, but I'll discard 2 white to move to the Gathering, which will bring 4 to the lodge. I'll place a cultist and an investigator. Temporary control here is a thing I would not mind getting at all, but let's see what happens on the roll. Because that'll let me try to go for the home run there. I don't get temporary control. There was a tentacle in there. It might have been hard to see. So I'll get 3 cultists back from the Abyss. Trying to keep that penalty at bay once again. And then I'll move 1 up to the other worlds. With green, blue, yellow, and 2 red, I'm actually going to prepare a Find Gate using the green and the yellow. So we'll prepare that to Ithaqua's Spell Reserve. And we'll draw card for here. Ithaqua is actually drawing 2 cards, so on a green he will find Transmogrify, taking a white and a yellow. Change any one-world die to any face. If the new face is Tentacle or Cthulhu, become cursed. And on a blue Ithaqua will find Sign of the Brotherhood, taking 2 red and a blue. You return 3 of your cultists from the Abyss and place them in your lodge. Before we go to the investigator's next turn, I do need to take a small break. At the streets of Arkham, the investigators will discard a green, trying to move to the Gathering, but they can't since I'm already there, so they'll move it up to the other worlds, placing another cultist and giving Ithaqua his third curse. He's getting into deep curse trouble on this one. Looking at Ithaqua's turn, is there anything I really want to prepare right now? There isn't. What I wouldn't mind doing is getting rid of some of these cultists, or some of these investigators, so I'm actually going to use a gate to move over to the streets of Arkham, which will place a cultist and an investigator. I want to try to get out of investigator trouble here. We'll bring the dice tower back in shot to roll for temporary control. As much as I like this dice tower, it is very, very imposing. Probably even more imposing than the dice tower I usually use for Eldritch Horror and those games. I do not get temporary control, which is unfortunate. Looks like you're tipped. There we go. Okay. Now that we've got that figured out, I do at least get to destroy 2 cultists from my lodge. Then I've got yellow, blue, 2 green, 2 red, and white, which I will use I don't need cultists right now. I think we'll just prepare an Alter Fate with using a yellow and a green that's there. So we'll prepare that for a potential reroll situation. And then Ithaqua on a white will draw. Call of the Wicked Ones, taking a yellow and 2 red. The investigators will then discard a white at the other worlds to move down to the ceremony, which will make that go away. And they'll place an investigator. Looking at my turn, I don't like this transmogrify, so I'm going to use a green at the streets of Arkham to move over to the gathering, placing a cultist and an investigator. Need a roll for temporary control. Here's a situation where I wouldn't mind getting it, because then I can at least move up to the gathering and go for it. Or not the gathering, the other worlds, and go for it. I don't get temporary control, which is unfortunate. The die might be a little bit hard to see from that distance. I do get 3 cultists back from the abyss. And I'll move 1 up to the other worlds. With green and a wild, there's nothing worth preparing. So Ithaqua will draw on a blue. Enthrall, taking 2 white. Choose 1 location that another cult controls. Destroy 2 of their cultists from that location. We're going to use that as being the investigators controlling the location. Speaking of the investigators, they will discard a yellow from at the ceremony to move down to the streets of Arkham, which will put another cultist out, and we will get rated with 2 dice. This could have been a whole lot worse. The way we've been trying to avoid investigators this game. Bring the dice tower there. He's at the museum, and we need 2 dice. One elder sign, but both investigators leave. I would have preferred no elder signs, but alas, nothing doing there. So we can get the investigators off the lodge, dice tower out of the way. Cultists are still at the other worlds. What is Ithaqua doing this turn? That is a good question. Do we go for it here? Because we only need 3 more on the summon track to be able to summon Ithaqua. But that's going to be his 4th curse as well, so we do need to be mindful of that. Yeah, I think the damage is starting to become somewhat irreversible, so we're going to use Find Gate here to draw a gate card, which we have to use for movement this turn. I think Ithaqua is going to go for it, so he's going to move up to the other worlds, taking the 4 cultists to his lodge, cultist and investigator. Then we had we're going to get ready for the summon roll, but we're also going to add cubes of power to add 2 additional dice to the roll. So we're rolling 6 dice. We need 3 summons, but Ithaqua is going to take his... If Ithaqua makes it, he's going to take his 4th curse. And because we control the location outright, we can sacrifice... Cthulhu effects are going to trigger, so we'll be able to pull any Cthulhus we roll. We'll give investigators back to the occultist back to the lodge. So let's see what happens here. One, two, three, and I'm going to cast Alter Fate as well to either reroll up to 3 of my dice once or 1 of my dice up to 3 times. I'm going to elect to roll 1 3 times. So I'm going to pull these out just to keep them out of the way so they don't get knocked. I'm going to roll this one 3 times. That's up to 3 times. I'm actually happy with that result. Gee, I wonder why. Actually, I didn't even need to re-roll it, because I would have already been able to sacrifice 3 of my cultists, which would advance me 3 on the summon track, so 1, 2, 3. Ithaqua would take his 4th curse in the process, but he will end up getting summoned, so I'm going to make some notes on my iPad. Ithaqua summoned, yes. Come on. He took 1 Elder Sign, but 4 curses. So that is something we need to keep an eye on. But I'm going to shut the camera off for a little bit so I can reset for our next Ancient Ones playthrough. Then we'll come back and we'll set the scene for that next Ancient One. Board's all set up for our second Ancient Ones playthrough. First we'll take a look at the artifact display. First up we'll find Elder Mask. Exhaust during your turn to place 1 additional lodge on your one additional investigator on your location. That seems dumb. As an exhaustion or discard, you don't take investigators from a location this turn. Second artifact in the artifact display is the Jade Statue once again, which we probably could have used earlier, but a little bit late to worry about that now. As for our monster display, I'll group those up just a bit better. Our first monster up is the Shoggoth. Place the Shoggoth at the other worlds. Once summoned and at the beginning of each of your turns, roll a die for each investigator present at the Shoggoth's location. For each Cthulhu, return 1 to the supply. For each greater Elder Sign, move 1 to the next clockwise location. After all dice have been rolled, move the Shoggoth to the next clockwise location. When Shoggoth returns to the other worlds, destroy all investigators on your lodge, then remove Shoggoth from play. And Deep Ones. Upon summoning, place 1 Deep One on 3 different locations. On your turn, you may remove 1 token to choose a location occupied by a Deep One and destroy an occultist or an investigator at that location. The Deep Ones count as 1 occultist for purposes of control, but can't be sacrificed. The special won't affect us because A, this is a solo game, and B, Dagon's not an Ancient One who's eligible for this tournament anyway. But let's go meet our second Ancient One in the winners group. The winner of Group 2 was the Crawling Chaos Nyarlathotep. We faced him during the Summer of Lovecraft 2022 and got pretty soundly trounced by him by a 3-0 score that was even deceptively close. As we can see, we've got his Dark Gift of Masks. Destroy 1 cultist from each other cult's lodge, then place an investigator on each other cult's lodge. The way we've house ruled his ability instead is I've got a regular D6 over here. So we're going to roll that when we trigger his Dark Gift. Based on the result, we can destroy that many investigators and replace them with our cultists. It's probably insanely powerful, but it was the best I could come up with in terms of a way to at least evoke the thematic feel of the Masks of Nyarlathotep. But let's move over to the board and see what the Crawling Chaos is doing with his playthrough. Oh, before we do that, we need to look at his starting spells. On a red, Nyarlathotep will have Alter Fate, taking a white and a yellow. Either reroll up to 3 of your dice once or 1 of your dice up to 3 times. On a green, he'll have Coerce the Innocent, taking white, yellow, red. We can see that there. That's probably movement fodder. And on a red, Witch's Curse. Taking yellow, blue. Choose a cult. That cult becomes cursed. That is probably going to be our first movement card, but let's move over to the board and see what Nyarlathotep is doing. For his first turn, Nyarlathotep will indeed bin the Witch's Curse at the other worlds to move to the library. Placing a cultist and an investigator, and let's see about temporary control at the location. Trying to put this down, there we go. Nyarlathotep does not get temporary control of the location, which is unfortunate but not altogether unexpected. What do I have? Okay, got that out of the way. 3 spells for Nyarlathotep, and we can ready an additional one, but with red-blue there's probably not much we're doing, and we've got 3 yellows. So Nyarlathotep will find first Confound, taking a white and 2 green. Move all investigators from a location to an adjacent location or destroy all investigators in your lodge. Next up, Alhazred's Vengeance, taking blue, white, green. You can see it there. That's probably going to be movement fodder at some point. And Rack, taking 2 white. Destroy an investigator from any one location or lodge. Looking at our hand, there's nothing here we're preparing, so Nyarlathotep will just draw a card. On a blue, he'll find The Stars Are Right, taking white and 2 yellow. Assign each cult, including yours, one of the following. Lose an Elder Sign, gain 2 investigators from the Abyss, gain 2 investigators, or become cursed. The investigators at the streets of Arkham will discard a red, trying to move to the library, but we're there, so they'll move to the other worlds instead, which will place an investigator and give Nyarlathotep his first curse. Then looking at his hand, well, I think the 2 yellow are going to be movement fodder. The only question is, where are we moving to with it? Because green isn't that good either. Not that I need cultists for anything. You know what? I think we're going to discard the 2 yellow at the library to move down to the ceremony, triggering his dark gift. So we'll place an investigator and a cultist. We'll roll for temporary control of the location. Bring that down there. He will not get temporary control of the location. I'm going to leave that there, though, because we are triggering his dark gift. I've got the regular D6 in the cup already. So for the number on here, we can destroy a cultist at a location, or destroy an investigator and replace it with a cultist. I'm ruling that that's only 1 per location. I should rule that that's only 1 per location, though, just to make it a little bit more balanced. This time we get a 1, though, so we're going to destroy an investigator at the other worlds and replace it with a cultist. We'll get that out of the way. With a white and a yellow, actually we do have an Alter Fate that we're going to prepare. So we'll discard that yellow. There's our Alter Fate that's going into my spell reserve. And then 3, Nyarlathotep will draw 1 card. He will draw on a red. Mind Switch, taking a blue and a green. Swap one of your cultists from any one location with another cultist from a different location. I'm ruling you can use that to swap investigators around. On a red at the other worlds, the investigators will discard that to move down to the library and place an investigator. Coming back to Nyarlathotep's turn, I will use the green to move over to the gathering, which will place an investigator and a cultist. Then we'll roll for temporary control. Just moving everything into place. Dice tower. Die into the cup. We won't get temporary control of the location, not that we really needed it here other than maybe getting another jump on the other worlds. But Nyarlathotep will get 3 cultists back from the Abyss and move 1 to the other worlds. With blue, green, red, we are going to prepare and immediately cast Mind Switch. Discarding that, which will let me swap a cultist with an investigator. So we'll swap this cultist from the streets of Arkham with this investigator. So that's all handled there. Then on a red, Nyarlathotep will draw Gate to the Past, taking 2 blue and a white. At the end of any other cult's turn, you may sacrifice 2 cultists from your lodge to take the current location's basic action. So we're ruling that as being during the investigators. At the end of the investigator's turn, we can sacrifice 2 cultists from the altar to take the location's basic action. But from the library, the investigators are discarding a green, trying to move to the gathering, except we're there, so they move to the other world instead, placing an investigator and giving Nyarlathotep his second curse right off the bat. Then coming back to Nyarlathotep's turn, is there anything he wants to prepare right now? Is there anywhere he can prepare right now? There really isn't, so I think he's just going to discard the Stars Are Right at the Gathering on a blue to move up to the museum, which will place a cultist and an investigator. I'm going to roll for temporary control because I wouldn't mind cycling the reserve out, cycling the artifact display. I don't need the control effect to be able to get rid of Elder Signs on the summon track. I mostly want the control effect so I can sweep the artifact display clear, which I don't get, unfortunately. So I'll actually draw an artifact from the top of the deck because I don't like either one of those. So Nyarlathotep will draw the Shining Trapezahedron. I can hold up to 2 gate cards. When exhaust, when another cult moves to the ceremony, draw 1 gate card. That's actually pretty useful because that can solve a lot of mobility problems. Blue-yellow, Nyarlathotep isn't preparing anything, so he'll draw. On a blue, he'll find Enlighten the Investigators, taking a red and a white. Cast when a cult discards a monster token, that cult places 2 investigators in their lodge. From the other worlds, the investigators will discard a green to move down to the gathering and place an investigator. Let's see, looking at our hand, that would need 2 blue and a white. There's nowhere we're preparing that. We might as well get going on his summon track then. So we're going to discard the gate at the museum to move up to the other worlds, which will place a cultist and an investigator. We could use Alter Fate, but I don't think we need it right now. So we're just going to go for a straight roll here with 5 dice. And since we have control, any Cthulhus we roll means the cultists come back to the lodge. So let's see what happens with Nyarlathotep's first summon roll. Sacrificing 2 and advancing 2 on the summon track. That's not terrible for a first try at a summon roll. It could be worse, but Nyarlathotep already does have 2 curses, so we do need to keep an eye on that. With wild, 3 red, green, blue. Wild, 3 red. I'm counting 3 red because I've got 1 red prepared in my reserve. I don't think we're preparing anything there. So on a green, Nyarlathotep will draw Sign of the Brotherhood, taking 2 yellow and a white. Return 3 of your investigators from the Abyss and place them in your lodge. I don't worry about the other cult because we're playing solo. The investigators at the gathering will discard a yellow to move down to the streets of Arkham, placing another cultist. That would trigger a raid, or an investigator. That would trigger a raid, but we don't currently have any investigators in the lodge, so we're not worried about that. Do I want to use... I think I will use Sign of the Brotherhood on a green, to move down to the Gathering, which will pull the cultists into the lodge. A little bit of a risk, but probably not a terrible one. We'll place a cultist and an investigator. Then we'll roll for temporary control once I get the dice tower back in shot. Well, at least I know where the die I'm going to roll fell. We do get temporary control of the location. So we can move all of our cultists at the location, but we'll get 3 back from the Abyss. And we'll move both of these up to the other worlds. I almost feel like he's going to have to try to hit a home run to get summoned here. Green, blue, yellow, and red, we're not preparing anything with that. So on a blue Nyarlathotep we'll draw. Transmogrify, taking red and green. Change any one-rolled die to any face. If the new face is a tentacle or Cthulhu, become cursed. The investigators at the Straits of Arkham will discard a white to move to the Gathering and place their 3rd investigator. Question is, do I have time to go digging for... Well, I'm going to have to do a little bit of digging, I think. Oh! I'll actually pay attention because another cult moved to the ceremony, so Nyarlathotep will get to draw a gate card. Which means now I've got options. I can get to the other worlds when I'm ready for it. We've got... Do we have anything that we're going to be able to prepare with? Probably. I'm actually going to use a Transmogrify from the Gathering on a blue to move up to the museum, which will place a cultist and an investigator. Once again, I'm not going to bother with temporary... This time I'm not going to bother with temporary control because I'm just drawing an artifact from the reserve and I don't have any Elder Signs. So Nyarlathotep will draw. Skull of Lore. Exhaust to roll 1 die. On a Cthulhu, discard Skull of Lore, advance 1 on your summon track. Greater Elder Sign, become cursed. Do we want to try that? I think we will. He really needs some progress on the summon track. That is why I'm going to gamble on this. And the more we can set up, the fewer problems we'll have when we finally move back to the outer worlds. Or the other worlds. That is a tentacle, so nothing happens there. We'll bring that out of the way. Then with blue, yellow, red, wild, I don't think we're preparing anything there, no. Which means the investigators which means Nyarlathotep on a yellow will draw. Broken Seal, taking 3 yellow. Destroy any 1 Elder Sign. You may sacrifice 1 cultist at the current altar location to destroy 1 more. The investigators from the ceremony are then discarding a blue, trying to move up to the museum, but they can't, so they move to the other worlds instead, which will put an investigator out and give Nyarlathotep his 3rd curse. So he's starting to get into a little bit of trouble. Coming back to his turn, are we going to risk a raid here? Next question is, do we have a choice? I think we're going to discard... Oh, this is bad. I think we're going to discard 2 yellow at the museum to move over to the library, which I am going to be risking a raid here, but I want to get some more cards in hand so I have more movement options. 1, 2, 3. First up on a blue Nyarlathotep will find Mind Switch, taking green and white. We forgot to place cultists and investigators. I do have control of the location outright, so I do need to be aware of that. And on 2 whites, the first one will find Gate, taking green and yellow, which we'll be able to prepare naturally, and Power Surge, taking a purple. Until the end of your turn, you control your current location. Looking at the spells here, I think we're going to prepare... We're going to prepare Find Gate for cost. And then we're going to sacrifice an investigator, or sacrifice a cultist, to prepare a gate to the past at no cost. Which means these are gone. And then Nyarlathotep will draw. He will draw Alhazred's Vengeance, taking green, white, red. But Nyarlathotep is getting rated here with 6 dice because he's got 6 investigators on his lodge. This was probably a really dumb play. We'll see what happens with this raid. Tip those back. Okay. That is yikes. That is 5 Elder Signs and 1 Investigator stays. That is going to be very bad unless Nyarlathotep can find a way to get rid of... Now we might start needing to go to the museum more often. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nyarlathotep cannot afford to get into much more curse trouble. Because if he does start getting into curse trouble... then any further progress on the summon track could end his tournament, could end his run in this tournament. Let's see, I don't think we drew for... Nope. So on a green, Nyarlathotep will draw. Enthralled. Actually, no, we just had the raid. Never mind. I'm dumb. We just had the raid. That's what it was. So the investigators are discarding a green at the other worlds to move down to the gathering and place an investigator there. What do we want to do with Nyarlathotep? I think we're going to cast Find Gate. We're going to have to risk it at this point. Well, if we risk it at this point and we miss, Nyarlathotep is going to be out of the tournament. But I think we are going to use Find Gate to move down to the streets of Arkham. Fortunately, he won't get raided at the end of the turn until there are 5 investigators in the lodge. But he'll place a cultist and an investigator there. He's not going to bother with temporary control because the ability to just destroy 2 is probably good enough for him right now. With 3 red, yellow, green, white... he's going to use the green and the white to prepare and immediately cast Mind Switch. So we can swap an investigator with a cultist. So all of that's gone. He will swap this cultist and this investigator. And then on a yellow, Nyarlathotep will draw Witch's Curse, taking green and yellow and white. Choose a cult, that cult becomes cursed. The investigators at the gathering will then discard a white to move to the ceremony, which will put another investigator out. Nyarlathotep will then exhaust the Shining Trapezohedron to draw another gate card, even though he already has... Well, he can have 2 because he's got the Shining Trapezohedron. At this point, now I think he does have to go for it, though. So, actually, that'll be 7 dice. So he could get summoned, conceivably. Yeah, we have to use this gate for movement, so we're going to discard that to the gathering, or the streets of Arkham. The only question is, where are we moving? I think we are moving to... I wish I thought of that at the end of the turn. But we'll unexhaust that. We are going to move to... You know what? Screw it. We're going to move to the other worlds. Nyarlathotep is not in a position to be picky right now. We'll put a cultist and an investigator out. He's going to take a risk, though. He's going to exhaust the Skull of Lore for a roll here to see if he can make further progress on the summon track to give himself a little bit of breathing room. He does not, which means he's rolling 7 dice. All of these have to be summons, and Nyarlathotep is going to be taking his 4th curse on the way. 5, 6, 7. Does he have, I think he's got mitigation for this, though. I believe he's got, yep, he's got a reroll prepared. We'll see what happens here, though. He does have control of the location outright, so that's at least something. He will sacrifice 3 cultists to advance 3 on the summon track. 1, 2, 3. But because his summon progress met his Elder Signs, he actually takes his 4th curse. Fortunately, that's a one-off effect, though, so he won't be facing that problem again. We can bring the Dice Tower out of shot. Then we'll draw a spell on a white we'll find. Call of the Wicked Ones, taking a yellow and 2 red. Summon a monster and become cursed. The investigators from the ceremony will then discard a white. Since the symbol matches, they try to move to the other world, but they can't. They'll move to the streets of Arkham instead, placing an investigator and giving Nyarlathotep his 5th curse. So he's actually out in the winners group. So coming over to my iPad to type up some notes. No, he made it to 5 on the track. He will not be our opponent for Christmas in Arkham. He took 5 Elder Signs and 5 curses. So now that that's all done, I'm going to shut the camera off once again and get the board ready for our last Ancient Ones playthrough. Everything's all set here for our last Ancient Ones playthrough. Let's go ahead and reveal the artifact display first. So first up we'll find a ceremonial dagger. Return to the supply up to 5 investigators from your lodge, then become cursed. And the other artifact is the Dust of Yuggoth. Discard to discard a spell from your hand to cancel any spell being cast. The spell is discarded without effect. So that's a one-time counter, which is not that great in the solo game. First monster that we have to choose from is the Hound of Tyndalos, which I'm pretty much going to ignore because you can pause and read there if you like, but I have never liked the Hound of Tyndalos in the solo game. And the Shuggoth, which seems to be so far about the only monster that's worth anything. Well, I take that back. Shub-Niggurath used the Bayaki last year to get out of to win the winners group in Christmas in Arkham. But speaking of the winners group this year, we need to go meet our last Ancient One, so let's do that now. Standing between Ithaqua and a rematch of Christmas in Arkham 2021 is the King in Yellow himself, Hastur, who most recently on the channel made Mandy and Jacqueline fall short in the fall campaign in Arkham Horror, the card game. So he's hardly an adversary to be trifled with. His dark gift is Dance of the Outer Gods. Starting from the ceremony and proceeding clockwise, you may roll 1 die for each location on the altar where you have a cultist present. For each tentacle or Cthulhu rolled, place 1 cultist from your lodge on that location and move 1 investigator from there to any location. We'll take a look at Hastur's opening hand. So first up on a blue he'll find Shadow Walk, taking 2 red and a white. At the end of your turn, you may immediately sacrifice. At the end of your turn, you may sacrifice a cultist and become cursed to immediately take another turn. Then we've got on 2 white, I should say. First up, find artifact, taking green, yellow. Draw 1 artifact from the artifact deck, and Corruption. Either sacrifice, taking yellow and green. Either sacrifice 2 cultists from your lodge or become cursed. Then you may advance 1 on the summon track or destroy 2 Elder Signs from your lodge. Some decent spells there, and I think at least 1 that looks like good movement fodder. Actually, these are all 3 pretty good spells, but let's move over to the board and see what Hastur's doing with them. Usually looking at these spells at the start of the game, there's usually been a case of, okay, this one's clearly movement fodder. The problem is we don't have that this time. All of these spells are pretty good, so it's a question of what's the least good spell right now, and I think the least good spell right now is Corruption, because I don't want to take too many curses. Although Hastur's got some breathing room on curses, he can take up to 3 curses, assuming one or fewer elder signs. So we'll discard the corruption on a white to move down to the ceremony, placing a cultist and an investigator. We'll roll for temporary control. I'm actually switching back over to the smaller dice tower. I'm going to trade out the green on green. I'm going to trade the green and green for being a much less imposing tower, because it fits so nicely right there. I like that other black tower a lot, but this is not the game for that tower. That thing is even more imposing, I think, than the usual tower that I use, the brown tower that I normally use. But enough rambling about the dice tower. Let's see if Hastur gets temporary control. He does, so I will need to keep an eye on that. I'll talk about the control effect in a minute. It could actually help Hastur immensely. He'll get a gate, and he'll get to trigger his Dark Gift, which could be dangerous because now he's only got 6 cultists. If all of these turn out to be cultist placements, then Hastur will be taking an Elder Sign penalty right off the bat, and that could be bad. But let's get a roll for the other worlds. That's a tentacle, so he'll get to place a cultist there, and we're going to stack the streets of Arkham. Then moving to the museum, we get to place another cultist there. This is what I was afraid of. We're probably going to have to move to the... Is that a you may? So we can... So theoretically, based on how that's reading, I can choose to skip a location if I want to, and I'm actually going to choose to skip the ceremony. Actually, I'm going to choose to skip the ceremony and the streets of Arkham, because I don't want to move cultists there. I will roll for the gathering, however. I also don't want to take the aforementioned Elder Sign penalty for having no cultists in my lodge. We've seen that come into play, but that'll be a fail at the gathering and at the library. Will be also a, well, fail. But we triggered Hastur's Dark Gift, so now with the control effect, Hastur can sacrifice 2 cultists to get an early jump on his summon track, so he's up to 1 already. Then with white and red at the location, Hastur is probably not preparing anything. No, he's not. So on a green, Hastur will draw. Mind Switch, taking red-blue. Swap one of your cultists from any one location with investigators at a different location. The investigators from the streets of Arkham are discarding a white to try to move to the ceremony, except we're there already, so they'll move it to the other worlds instead and give Hastur his first curse. Hastur at the ceremony will discard his... Do we want to discard his gate card? Actually, it's another case where the Mind Switch is actually really good. So I'll discard the gate card here to move over to the gathering, which will place a cultist and an investigator. Here I want temporary control so I can start moving quickly, hopefully, through Hastur's summon track. We don't get temporary control, which is not a big surprise. We'll pull 3 cultists back to the lodge and move 1 up to the other world. With blue-green, I don't think Hastur is preparing anything. No, he's not. So we'll draw on a green. Hastur will draw. Confound, taking blue to yellow. Move all investigators from one location to an adjacent location, or destroy all cultists in your lodge. Alright, the investigators will then discard a blue up at the other worlds to move over to the museum and place an investigator. I'm kind of cheating a little bit. Well, maybe not. I think we're going to use the... I think I'm going to use the Find Artifact as much as I don't want to move back to the ceremony. I'll place a cultist and an investigator. I don't take them on because I'm putting my 3rd one out now. I'll get another gate card, and I get to trigger Hastur's Dark Gift again. So starting from the other worlds, we'll go ahead and give this a roll. That's a Cthulhu, so I will get to place a cultist there. I would get to move an investigator, but there are no investigators there. At the museum, we'll go ahead and roll there. I'll get to place a cultist there and move an investigator. I'm going to skip the ceremony and the streets of Arkham once more, rolling for the gathering, which will probably need to be another pretty soon stop. No, and rolling for the library. No. All right, and then I didn't roll for temporary control because I wasn't interested in it. With white, red, wild, I'm actually going to prepare... Question is, do I want to prepare Shadow Walk or Mind Switch? I think I'm going to prepare Shadow Walk. This is a tough decision because those are both really good spells. Gate goes back there. So at the end of my turn, I can sacrifice a cultist and become cursed to immediately take another turn. So if I get a big summon attempt ready at the other worlds, I can use that to try to hold the... I can then try to use that to kind of go for the home run, which I don't have a huge one ready yet. On a blue Hastur we'll find Broken Seal, taking 3 blue. Destroy any one Elder Sign. You may sacrifice an occultist at the current altar location to destroy 1 more Elder Sign. Okay, I think I will... Well, the investigators are discarding a green at the museum to move to the gathering, which was probably going to be my next stop. Okay, then what am I doing with Hastur? I think we're going to discard a Broken Seal on a blue to move up to the museum. We'll put a cultist out... And then we have control outright, so we could clear the artifact reserve, which I think will draw an artifact first, so Hastur will find. Enchanted Cane, exhaust to reroll 1 of your dice. Then we are going to clear the artifact reserve because I'm not that impressed with it. Replacing it first will be the Elder Mask. We saw this earlier but ignored it. And then going out with it will be Chambers Journal. Exhaust, choose any one location, then roll a die. Cthulhu or Tentacle, add 1 investigator from your lodge to that location. Greater Elder Sign, add an investigator from that location to your lodge. That seems delightful. And we don't have any Elder Signs, so nothing to worry about there. With blue, green, red. I think we're going to use the blue and the red there to prepare Mind Switch, which we can't immediately cast because I want to move to the other worlds, but nothing doing there. And then since Hastur only has 1 card in hand, he'll be drawing 2. So on a white Hastur we'll find Gate, taking green, yellow. At the start of your turn, draw a gate card, regardless of whether you have one or not. During the move phase, you have to use that gate for movement. And on a red, Alter Fate, taking yellow, white. Either reroll up to 3 of your dice once or 1 up to 3 times. I also have to remember that... I did prepare Mind Switch, so those are gone. The investigators at the gathering are discarding a green to try to move to the gathering, but they move to the other worlds instead, placing another investigator. I'm looking at 2 cultists right now. I definitely don't want to go to the ceremony and risk triggering Hastur's Dark Gift with that few cultists. So I'm going to discard a Confound on a green at the museum to move down to the gathering, which will bring these 4 investigators into my lodge. That has the potential to be a problem, but I don't think we can avoid it at this point. Gaining an investigator, putting a cultist and an investigator. Rolling for temporary control. That is not temporary control. I'll get 3 cultists back, and I'll move 1 up to the other worlds. We're definitely going to need to go for it at some point here. On a yellow, Hastur will find Rack, taking 2 white. Actually, we should have looked if we can prepare anything first with a... wait, we need to place an investigator at the other worlds. Helps if I remember that. 2 green, white, blue. Actually, we've got 3 green, 2 blue, and a white, which we're not preparing anything with. So now on a yellow, Hastur will find the aforementioned Rack. Then we are actually going to cast Mind Switch to swap an investigator. We'll swap Streets of Arkham in cultist with that investigator at the other worlds. The cultist will discard a red at the other worlds to move over to the library and place an investigator. Looking at Hastur, what is he doing? Do I want to go somewhere where I can prepare... What is there anything I want to prepare this turn? I think... that's a good question, if I want to prepare anything. And I think... Or do I want to just go trigger his Dark Gift and get ready, hopefully, for a big summon attempt? No, that's actually a bad idea, because that's going to put 7 investigators in my lodge and trigger a raid. Yeah, let's think about this again. I think what we're going to do instead is we're going to use the... This is a tough one. Do we use the gate or... I think we almost have to. So we're going to use the gate to move to the museum. Placing a cultist and an investigator. We have control of the location outright, so we'll get to sweep the artifact display clear. I'll draw an artifact from the top. Hastur will find Runic Chalk. While Runic Chalk is in play, increase your spell reserve by 1. Discard to ready a spell for free. That could be tempting. But I will sweep the reserve, the artifact display clear. Replacing it will be the Jade statue, which we saw earlier. And mistranslated manuscript. Discard to cancel a raid. Choose another cult and initiate a raid on their lodge. Then roll a die. On a result of any elder sign become cursed. Alright, and I don't need to sacrifice cultists to clear elder signs. So on a green, Hastur will find Dark Pact, taking a white and a red. Become cursed to prevent gaining all elder signs from a single source. Is that going to be worth preparing the... Is that going to be worth sacrificing the Runic Chalk? I see what's coming up, and that's what's got me thinking about it. I think it is worth sacrificing worth using the Runic Chalk here. So I'll discard that to ready Dark Pact for free. Like I said, mostly because I see what's coming. So from the library, the investigators will discard a yellow to move down to the Streets of Arkham, placing an investigator and initiating a raid with 4 dice. This could be a huge problem for Hastur, because tiebreakers are a thing in this tournament. So let's see what we do here. If we're taking a lot of elder signs, that curse is probably going to be worthwhile. To stop it. Whoa, yikes. Yeah, 3 elder signs and 2 investigators stay. I think that's worth being cursed for. So we'll become cursed to prevent gaining all of those elder signs. 2 of the investigators stay, though, which is going to be a big, big problem. Which almost makes me want to send Hastur. Can we get him to the other worlds? We cannot. And moving down to the ceremony to get another gate would trigger another raid. That's probably a very perilous play. So I think what we're going to do from the museum is discard an alter fate so we can move over to the library, which will put a cultist and an investigator out. We'll see if we can we'll see if we can get temporary control of the location. It would be very helpful if we get this. So of course we don't, naturally. We'll draw 3 spells and we can ready an additional one with the same column. 1, 2, 3. On a blue Hastur we'll find Call of the Wicked Ones, taking green and 2 white. Summon a monster and become cursed. Not that either one is particularly good. On a red, Cubes of Power, taking blue and green. When you're rolling dice, you may add 2 additional dice to the roll. And on a white, Witch's Curse. Choose a cult, that cult becomes cursed. Okay. With blue, red, white, yellow. Blue, red, white, yellow. We're not preparing anything with that. So on a white Hastur we'll find Enthrall, taking 2 red. Choose a location that another cult controls. Destroy 2 of their cultists at that location, and we're using that for investigators. From the streets of Arkham, the investigators will discard a blue to move up to the museum and place another investigator. Let's see, we can get to the other worlds, but that's not going to help us with the summon track right now. The problem is we need to get some of those investigators away from... We need to get some of those investigators away from the museum. Or those cultists, I should say. What do we want to do here? I think it's probably worth the risk, though, to try to move some of those investigators. So we're going to discard 2 white at the library to move up to the other worlds, which will put a cultist and an investigator out. Since I control the location outright, I'll be rolling 7 dice. The furthest I could get here is... The furthest I'd be able to get here is to 8 on the summon track. That might still be worth the risk. I do think I have... Yep, I've got Shadow Walk, but that's not exactly mitigation for this. So 4, 5, 6, 7. 2, 4, 6, 7. Okay. So let's see what happens here. I would not mind some Cthulhu's here. That'll work. So that looks like 5... That'll be sacrificing 5 cultists. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 2 return to my lodge to advance 5 on the summon track. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So Hastur's up to 6 now on the summon track. But he is going to have to try to return at some point. Which is still not terrible, but it mostly gets him out of the woods with the Elder Sign penalty. Then looking at his hand, he's got 2 blue, white, yellow, red, wild. I think we're going to use the blue and the wild as a green to prepare Cubes of Power, so we have a little bit more... So we have more rolling when we get up there again. We can add more dice to the roll. Then on a green Hastur we'll draw. Find Gate taking white, red. We saw this earlier. The investigators will discard a red at the museum to move over to the library and place another investigator. Question now is, do we have to risk a raid? I think the answer is, unfortunately, this is bad, because if we risk a raid and we get burned, then Ithaqua is going to be our opponent. Well, we do have some curses to play with, but remember, the first tiebreaker is Elder Signs. what we could do... Actually, you know what? I've got a better idea than that. I'm going to discard a... I'm going to discard a Find Gate on a green as much as I don't want to move down to the Gathering. I've got a little bit of a plan here, which will place a Cultist and an Investigator. Because I control the location outright, I get to take the control action. So I'll get to take these 3 Cultists back to my lodge and move these 3 back to the other world. So I'm basically all set up for Hastur's next summon attempt. With 3 green, we've got 3 green, 2 blue, red, white, wild. This is going to feel like a way... Actually, this might work. This might work as crazy as it sounds. So, I've got a little bit of a plan here. So I'm going to use the green and the wild as a yellow to cast Find Gate, to prepare Find Gate. Which at the start of my turn means I draw a gate card that I have to use for movement. So those get discarded. Then on a red Hastur we'll find Sign of the Brotherhood. We were only worried about the return 3 of your cultists from the Abyss and place them in your lodge. So here's where it's going to start getting crazy. We've had Shadow Walk prepared all game, and now we're going to cast it. So at the end of my turn, I can sacrifice a cultist, which will be from my lodge, and become cursed, which will be Hastur's 3rd curse, to immediately take another turn. Then at the start of that turn, Hastur is going to cast Find Gate, which will give me a gate card, but I have to use it for movement, which I want to anyway. Hastur is going to move up to the other worlds, placing a 6th cultist and a 2nd investigator. And then I think we've got another spell for this roll coming up. Yes, we do. So we're going to cast Cubes of Power to add 2 dice to the roll. Hastur's rolling 8 dice. Let's set the scene here just so we have everything straight. 2, 4, 6, 7, 8. So here's the situation we're at right now. Hastur's at 7 on the summon track, and he's about to roll 3 dice. If 3 of these are summons, and he's got the Enchanted Cane for a reroll. If 3 of these are summons, Hastur will have taken no Elder Signs on his way to getting summoned, and because of the Elder Sign tiebreaker, Hastur will be our opponent for Christmas in Arkham. But before we roll this out, I need to take a small break. I wish I had some dramatic epic music waiting that I could play in the background, but alas, once again, just to set the scene, we're rolling 8 dice at the other worlds. We need at least 3 of these to be summoned. At least 3 of these to be summons. If we get that, Hastur's our opponent for Christmas in Arkham. So, let's give the roll and see what happens. That looks like exactly 3 summons, and we're not going to use the Enchanted Cane because we don't need it. So if we're doing this by the book, we would sacrifice 3 cultists, 2 would come back to the lodge, but we'll advance 1, 2, 3 on the summon track. So Hastur, once again putting up another strong performance. Not as strong as his performance in the play-in group for Group 3. He got summoned, took no Elder Signs, and 3 curses. By virtue of taking no Elder Signs in his playthrough here during the winners group, Hastur is actually going to be waiting for us as our opponent for this year's Christmas in Arkham, and I'm kind of glad for that, because I didn't want to start rematching Ancient Ones this soon. I didn't want to be facing a rematch with either Ithaqua or Nyarlathotep, and believe me, if I would have pulled a rematch with Nyarlathotep out of this, I would have grabbed the heavy artillery for this one, but we might still need the heavy artillery for this one, because I know how dangerous Hastur can be. But that is it for the Fate of the Elder Gods tournament. What's coming up on the channel? Wednesday we're debuting our last New Game for New Game November as we play Spirit Island. I'm expecting the end of November recap to be Thursday, but don't hold me to that. Friday is going to be a little bit of a light video with the Investigator intro for Christmas in Arkham. Saturday, Mystical Munchies will start us in a new cookbook, but I'll talk more about that during the end of November recap. And next week, we're playing Eldritch Horror, the first leg of Christmas in Arkham. Thank you for watching the video. Please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to turn on notifications so you get my content. Be well, stay safe, take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and I'll be back with more videos in the future. Until then, take care everyone.